So when we're thinking about things like government, what are some of the things we typically want from our government, right? We typically want stuff like transparency. We give them taxpayer money. We want to know what they're doing with that money. How is it impacting me? How is it impacting my community? We operate under this idea of the consent of the governed, which means we want our government to be very transparent about what it is they are actually doing. Except in one area, apparently, and that is, of course, education. For the most part, most of us have no idea what our public schools are teaching. How many of you have actually been to a PTA meeting? How many of you have actually gone and tried to talk to people who are on, your local board of education, right? How many people have actually really asked their kids, what exactly are you learning when you're in school? The reality is kids a lot of times are spending more time with their teachers than they are with their own parents, which is kind of a disturbing thing when you realize how little you actually know about your teacher. How little do you know about what's actually going on in the school? What is it they're doing for the hours your kid is in there? People like Matt Walsh, as well as I think Tucker Carlson, have kind of gotten a little bit of hot water apparently with the left, all for suggesting that maybe we should have cameras in schools so that parents can actually see what it is their kids are doing. And the fact that the left, as well as teachers unions, have come out and just gone crazy against this, saying it's dystopian, it's Orwellian, because of course they have no idea what 1984 was really about. It really goes to show they are fearful of something. They are fearful of this movement of parents who actually want to know what it is that's being taught in their schools. You've seen stuff like books being taught and they're being brought in schools now that are literally doing things like painting white people as devils, and I'm not even exaggerating on that, right? There's a Chicago school that recently had a book up, and I'll probably pull a picture of it right here, of the contract of whiteness and how evil whiteness is, right? This is sort of stuff that they're showing in schools, and it's worrisome in multiple ways, right? Some people are saying it's worrisome because it's anti-white, which means you have people who are going to be racist towards white people. In fact, I would say I think my biggest worry might actually be the opposite, where you have a bunch of white students who go, hey, screw you, and give the middle finger, and go the other way and become kind of maybe racist themselves, just because they're going to rebel against what they're being taught that race is important. So how are the white students going to also rebel against this awful teaching? It's the problem with CRT. Once you say race is important, well, now you've brought in racial politics on both sides, and that is a disturbing point. But right now the teachers union have now actually said they want CRT in every school. So everyone's saying that well, CRT wasn't a real thing. CRT doesn't really exist. Well, now they're actually, teachers union are saying that yes, it exists, and we want it everywhere. And now they're also saying, of course, we don't want cameras in schools. We don't want people knowing what's being taught. We don't want parents to be actually informed on what their kids are learning. In fact, a lot of stuff they're teaching kids is how to not tell their parents things, right? How to hide what they're learning in schools. This has been a major problem for actually kind of quite a while now, but I think parents are finally starting to wake up, with the pandemic. A lot of kids were doing online learning, and teachers were, there's that famous rant of the teachers saying, oh God, the parents are actually going to know what it is we're telling their children. That should be the expectation. The expectation should be that I should know what you're teaching my kid. The expectation is that any parent should instantly be able to know the entire curriculum that's being taught. Every piece of paper that's being handed to their child, the parent should have access to. All right, and the good part is with stuff like the Freedom of Information Act, some parents have been getting a hold of this stuff, and that's where we're starting to learn all this crazy stuff being taught. More parents are starting to be more active in their child's lives when it comes to their education. That's fantastic. But right now, we have to be on our toes, because the school system is beyond corrupt. It's been beyond corrupt for a long time. I think it was, it might have been, I believe it was like Michael Malice who I think brought up the fact that throughout a person's life, the only place they'll really experience any real violence is typically in schools, right? Schools have always had multiple problems, right? You have constant problems of, abuse from teachers as well as from other students. And the school does nothing about it, right? All of us who went to public school understand this. The school system does nothing about it. And I went to a good public school. I went to what's considered a very high quality public school. And, don't get me wrong, there were some teachers that did a great job. Obviously, there are some, amazing teachers in the system. But there's a lot of things about the school system itself that just are terrible. They're just awful. They're just strictly made to tell people exactly what to think. Here's what you're going to think. And never teaching people, of course, how to think. How are we going to have critical thinking skills? We barely teach history anymore. We don't teach anything on accounting. We don't teach any basic level of economics. And then we wonder why kids are having a hard time when they leave high school. Why are they not, going into society and making something of themselves? Well, when you've taken away stuff like history, which of course actually helps us when it comes to wisdom. You can't be wise without understanding of history. It just doesn't work. You can be intelligent. You can know a lot of things, but without history, you won't be wise. You won't be able to critically think. You won't be able to put things in perspective about what is going on in the world. History is our link to the past in many ways. Well, link to the past. It is our link to the past in many different ways, right? It allows us to actually have a better understanding of what's came before, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And when you have that knowledge, you can critically think in a better way, which of course is something that the public school system has never wanted people to do. They've never wanted people to critically think. They never wanted people to question authority. Schools have always been about, here is your schedule. You will go by this schedule. The clock rings at this exact time. You move to your next class. You have lunch at this time. It has always been about basically making more cogs in the machine, right? Pink Floyd say, another brick in the wall. That's exactly what the school system creates. It has never created free thinkers. Most people who I know who have actually gone on and done some of the most amazing things I've seen have all been people who either dropped out of high school or dropped out of college, right? They actually have taken the time to actually build themselves up instead of just learning the nonsense they push in schools. Because right now the schools, once you get past middle school, it is completely, even in middle school, it's basically almost completely worthless. Once you have a basic understanding of mathematics and how to write your name and how to read, that's about all really school teaches that's actually worthwhile in the first place at this point. They don't teach history, don't teach accounting, don't teach economics. And again, like I said, kids then go out and they don't know how to set a budget and they go into terrible debt. They don't understand basic levels of accounting of how to do their taxes, and they wonder, well, why is this so complicated? The schools aren't preparing them for the real world. A lot of these kids can't even change a damn tire. This should be required in classes. Very simple things should be required in these classes. They aren't prepared for the real world, and we wonder why they then go to Big Daddy government for all their answers, right? They go to the government because they don't know any different. Throughout their entire lives, they're told, oh, you have a problem? Well, go to your teacher. Go to your teacher. Go to your principal. They'll solve it for you. So when they get to the real world and they don't have that teacher, that principal there, what are they supposed to do, right? They're supposed to go to government. They don't have, their family connections have been broken down over time. So because of that, they have no one they can really turn to half the time. And then, of course, all that's left at that point is the government. And that's all they have ever wanted. The whole point of school system at this point is to get people to a point where the only people they really ask for help is the government. They don't ask their community. They don't ask, their family. They don't look into themselves and figure out, okay, well, what can I do to fix this problem? Instead, they're just going to say, well, it's not fair. Life was fair when I was in school. Let's just get government. Let's make the government make everything fair for me. Tough luck. Life isn't fair. And we need to prepare kids for this reality. We need to prepare kids for what's going to come ahead, not just put them in a perpetual state where they're always a child in school. You see people right now in their 30s who are no different than like a high schooler, right? It's pathetic. It's terrible. It's awful. The one thing that gives me hope right now, right? The one thing that actually gives me some amount of hope is all these parents who are actually starting to really step up to the plate, take an active role in their PTA and their, boards of education, actually really taking an active role in their child's life, actually knowing, okay, what are you learning each day? Hey, let's all have dinner together. Hey, what did you learn today, right? Simple things like that to figure out, okay, what are they teaching my kid? What are they teaching my kid, and what do I need to be concerned about? What should I bring up at the next conference? People are starting to take an active role, and that's fantastic. I think Steve Bannon recently said, and whatever your feelings are about Bannon, I have definitely some own feelings, but I think he was right about one thing he said recently, which is that he's optimistic because more parents are starting to wake up to what schools are teaching them. That is a positive thing happening right now, right? A big part of the stuff like the Communist Manifesto is controlling education, controlling the youth. If we can break that that breaks almost everything else. So we need to be taking a more active role in our kids' lives. So if you have children, if you have kids in school, we have to make sure we are actually taking an active role as parents of knowing what it is they're learning. We got to start going to these PTA meetings. We got to start making our opinions heard, because it's only then that we'll start making a real difference. And I'm really excited for what's kind of coming forward in a lot of these organizations all across the country who are really starting to push and push and push against the corrupt teachers unions, against the corrupt public school system. And hopefully one day we'll get to a point where we can actually have true freedom of education like we really, really want, right? With charter schools, with home schools, with public schools, with just other private schools, right? Hopefully one day we'll get to a point where all of the states have actually, choice in their education decisions for their children. Either way, if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on some of the crazy stuff that maybe you've seen going on in the education system, because there are a lot of them out there. I could list some more off all day, but I'm already probably rambling a bit too much as is. So again, please make sure like, subscribe, and we'll see you again real soon.